Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In this video, I want to talk about a few important factors as of the present and leading into the future. Number one, the stadium. As the results of Manchester United's survey of supporters has gone out in favor of a new stadium, but I want to talk about some of what's going on there, the delays, and what it might mean, as it also ties into the situation, as it were, over transfers, budgets, things like that. Talk about Amorim squad, talk about January, summer, and players returning from injury. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, obviously, the whole Old Trafford regeneration project has been something, a big part of the overall process of the takeover. How do we get the stadium up to par? How do we expand it? How do we regenerate the whole area? And obviously, as we've seen, the way that they've been leading into this since coming in has been probably that they'd like to get a new stadium, regenerate the whole area around Old Trafford to make it a real destination. They've presented some pictures and mock-ups and ideas and things like that of what it would look like around the stadium should they do that. And as a part of this and involving the fans, they've also, of course, very recently did a survey of supporters and groups and members and things like that, and then put those results out. And per their own study, what was it, around 51% of people voted for a new stadium, with around 17% being undecided, leaving 30%, 35% or so wanting to regenerate or renovate, rather, the current stadium. So it's all heading in one direction, which is towards a new stadium. However, a big part of all of this is how are they going to fund it? Because not only do they need the new stadium, but the grounds around there to be changed, for the railway to be moved, or it was the train depot to be moved, and to build this whole thing up. And it's something that they feel should be done in conjunction with the city to make it a real destination. There's a lot of precedent for this and a lot of examples of it. Just here in Denver, for example, where I live, the Cronkies, who own Arsenal, obviously, have just gotten approved with the city a whole regeneration project around the stadium that the Nuggets, the basketball team they own, as well as the Avalanche play in this huge downtown overall project regen, which is really cool what they're doing, but it was a 3-year plan. It took 3 years, I think, to get approved, and it will be a 25-year process, the entire thing. So these are not necessarily always short-term things. They cost a lot of money. They can be very difficult. And as of now, we're not seeing exactly how this can happen yet and the exact route in which this can occur. But it is being worked on. At the same time, we also have a story from James Ducker saying that they're delaying it until next summer at the minimum to make this decision based on the budgets from the area, the certain political things that are going on there, where I guess the city government, etc., has a budget hole, and it's hard to see them spending or investing money, even though in the long term would probably return. It's hard to see how they can do that, which is seemingly a major challenge. So this is probably something that's going to take some time. It always does, but I imagine, realistically, we're talking about a while until this occurs. Prior to getting in, Ineos had been looking into different routes for investment, partnerships, things like that, but none of those have seemed to really come through as of yet, or be valuable as of this point in time. But it is something where, I would consider this strongly to be a very long-term outlook on all of this, and certainly none of it's something that's going to happen very quickly. Again, based on looking at it from other areas and other places where this has happened, a lot of times the overall projects run into so many snags, things like that, really 5 years is probably a short end of an estimate to getting these things done. But in addition to that, one of the factors that is taking place that I want to discuss in this video is about transfers and the spending for players. Because in order for all of this to work, and a big part of what's going to drive interest in getting people involved, in convincing, the government, town, other places, all of that this is a worthwhile project, is not just, financials, but United need to become, again, a powerhouse of football in England and across Europe, where you're getting Champions League nights and visitors from Europe all the time coming into the city, and visitors from other countries as well coming into the city and coming to watch games and see games. And the biggest games in the world are once again happening at Old Trafford. And that would be a big driving factor in making this happen. And unfortunately, going into this season, having to already sack the manager after 10 games and things looking about as bad as they ever be does not help present a convincing argument to investors, to partners, to the markets, as well as to anybody involved in convincing them that this is something worth doing, and that United are on their way back up to being the biggest club in Europe, if not maybe the second biggest to Real Madrid. But that is a factor in this. And at this point in time, United need and understand the need, as I can gather, to spend more money and to really invest in the squad, and they very much plan to. And even as soon as January, that they know essentially we've got to divert funds and do what we need to continue building the squad now under our new manager, Ruben Amorim, and give him what he needs to do so, because we cannot continue to limp along at the place that we are in, and we know that that's going to take money as well. So that's what I want to talk about. That the first thing I want to talk about here is, when it comes to transfers and things like that, is Amorim players. Now, I think, as I've shared before, that for one of the first times, probably the first time in appointing a manager, they do feel that they have the core foundations of a very good squad when it comes to the core foundations of a very good squad when it comes to like the fit with a manager, that they don't have to rebuild the entire squad, but that doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be significant spending and costs associated with putting it together. The one thing that they will not be doing, and that they don't intend to do, and because you already see all the speculation about it, is to just go out there and buy Amorim players. What I mean by that is they're not just going to go buy players because they have a prior relationship with Ruben Amorim. They're going to buy players if they fit their overall styles, value, way they want to build the squad, and the quality of such players at the right prices. Obviously, there might be players that Amorim has coached that fit that, but not really that many. And they're not going to change the whole transfer strategy based on Ruben Amorim. A lot of the purchases and things that were made this summer were made in mind with their idea of a squad. Amorim fits that in the same way that the players that they've been signing fit that. It's not the wrong way around there. Amorim is a manager that fits their style, as are the players that they're signing that fit their style. So they're not going to sign Amorim players. They're going to sign players that continue to align with this philosophy. One of the major changes. Ruben Amorim is expected to obviously have a say in how things are done, but ultimately he will not be able to block signings. Not that you would expect him to, and they don't want him to be even doing that necessarily. Potentially neither does he. He will entrust in them to help him get the squad that he needs. What they are going to ask him to do, and I'll get into some of the transfer information here in a second that I have as for January and moving forward, which hasn't changed as much as you think. But one of the biggest tasks that he's going to be having to do right now, between this period and even January, is to evaluate the squad, evaluate the players. Now, this obviously isn't all the players. I've just put potentially what might be your first choice players in these positions, to evaluate them and say, okay, yeah, in the areas that we have questions, do we have the players that we need to do well in these things, or where am I really missing the profiles? Now, one of the things that they feel pretty confident about is that in the spine of the team, between Onana, De Ligt, Ugarte, Kobbie Mainoo, and Rasmus Højlund, that they have a very, very strong team that fits this style. They have done a lot of work to build up this spine, and on the right side, they feel they have a lot of options here. But that is going to be one of the things that he is tasked with very much throughout this season. Is not so much, do I pick the players that we're going to sign. Do I say, yeah, I want this individual? No. But to look at the profiles that are already in the team, put them in the right spots, and then say, okay, where are we not as proficient? And potentially, where do we actually have someone who could fit this that maybe we thought we didn't? That would change our approach to the window. Because while they have lists and ideas and players in mind and are watching large numbers of players for different positions, which I'm going to go through some of those in a minute, the priority of these players is going to be in large part determined by Amorim's assessment with his team of our squad. Where is it a bigger need, which may be different to obviously the assessments that were made under Ten Hag and others once he gets in there and gets into it. So that's where things could change quite a bit. Not so much in the specificity of picking players, but in which positions are lacking at United. Which positions does he not have the profiles that are needed, or maybe the depth in the profiles that are needed, and where is it the biggest priority? So let's talk about January, okay? If you go back to a video that I made in the summer, towards the end of summer, I talked about their approach, where instead of this concept of like 3 in, 3 out, or we're just going to buy a few players, and then get through the business, they looked at it and said, how do we rebuild the entire squad? How do we just take the whole squad and say, what is everything that we know we need to rebuild the squad? And then they just go through it and get the deals done, get the deals done, get the deals done. Well, and as many as they can. Well, look, they are still looking at things that way. And per my understanding, they are still, just, it's going to be put out there. United are tight on finances in January, not expected to be very busy, things like that, for sure. That's going to be what's out there. However, per my understanding, they are willing to and able to make some signings in January if the right opportunity presents itself. And the right opportunity is not a random thing, is not something out of the blue, but would be if something in their overall plan for reshaping the squad is available. So again, this will be in part determined by, the assessments that Ruben Amorim makes and discussions that will occur, deep into between now and January on this. Based on their original plan, here's where they've had some questions, okay? I'm not taking Bruno Fernandes out of this because he isn't in the plans. I'm taking him out of it because I'm just demonstrating where they thought they had some weaknesses. On this right-sided forward, it was an area that they looked at last year. They had a lot of interest in Michael Olise. They want to move Anthony on. Ahmad has not yet, as of yet, established himself. And we really don't have somebody, even behind Bruno Fernandes, coming through in the team already, in the senior team already, to say, yeah, this could be the guy that replaces Bruno long-term. We don't have that yet. We have maybe Ahmad, okay? Bruno Fernandes maybe has a couple of years. So they've looked at that area and said, hey, this kind of 10/right-sided forward that may exist under Ruben Amorim, but even in their old system, they were looking at this. That's an area where we need somebody. And you've seen there's certain names that I've linked and that I know United have looked at on the younger side. In talking to and talking about that I've covered that continue to be targets for this reason. So there's guys like Mastantuono who fit into potentially that role almost perfectly if they decide they want to go for him. There's other names that I've mentioned in recent times as well, but that continues to be an area of interest that they're going to want Amorim's assessment for how priority is it. If he can get someone like Ahmad going, it reduces the need and the priority of it a little bit more. But long-term, they're still going to want that almost midfielder, 10/right-sided forward, to be in the team. Now, we have players coming through in the youth, but they're probably not ready yet. Shea Lacey, Ibrahimov are both players I think who could fit into that, but realistically, it's going to be a few years. So it's going to depend there based on that assessment. If that opportunity presents itself and potentially that could switch sides to it. Doesn't necessarily 100% have to be right-sided, But, if a Nippon or a Mastantuono or something like that, it looks available in there and they could get it on a good deal, then that would be something they would consider should Amorim tell them, yeah, we need more profiles in this position. So that's one area of focus to look at that continues to be of interest and that they are still assessing different options for. There's other names that we talked about last year. Interestingly, I made minor links to, and I understand them to be accurate, minor links to a player who does play at Sporting and Marcus Edwards. But yeah, I don't think we'll be going for him. At the same time, he's quite cheap and could fill a depth signing in that role. Other positions are in the midfield. I'm not going to remove either of these because they do feel they have a couple good starters in here, but the depth here is really poor. Casemiro is a player, as I've said, who obviously as he's aging and he's only going to have 1 year left after this year, they're not sure whether he'll be around. If the opportunity presents itself for Casemiro to move on, now that Ten Hag is gone, I would say there's actually more likelihood that Casemiro stays. But if the opportunity presents itself, they know, yeah, we need another 6. We need another deep midfielder to be fitting into these roles. And it's the same thing for Kobbie Mainoo. Christian Eriksen is again nearing the end of his contract. I've told you before, and I stand by this, that they would consider opportunities to move him on in January. And if it allows them as well to make a move for a player in this position, they don't have a lot of options. Christian Eriksen is going to have a really hard time filling this role in an Amorim system because of the energy and the legs that are required. We don't have a lot of backups here. Mason Mount could fit into one of these roles, but he's rarely ever healthy. Again, we have some young players coming through, but they're probably a few years away. So the name Chris Rigg, Hayden Hackney, Adam Wharton continued to be names of interest among others. And if an opportunity presented itself to move someone like Christian Eriksen on, that would open up the door for them to make a move for a young player in that position, and they would be open to that. Don't know, obviously, if they can pull it off, what the costs would be at this point in time as of yet, but that is an area that is under consideration. Can they get someone like Chris Rigg into a position like this for, in January? If the opportunity is there, it would probably require the moving of Casemiro or Christian Eriksen, and Eriksen is more realistic in order to do it, and that is something that is being looked at. On the left side, I take Shaw out because he hasn't played. Now, he is expected to be back, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is an area we already know is a big priority and is probably the number one priority for January at this point in time, and an area where they are already looking. They have been looking, and they're expected to consider. Now, Alvaro Fernandez, they've not been actively pursuing or talking about talking to any club about actually bringing him back or made any contact with him about coming back as of yet, but is an obvious name that could fit into this position. The other names that I've linked in the past, I understand, continue to be of interest in Kirkes, Ait-Nouri, Miguel Gutierrez, and Anthony Robinson. There surely will potentially be more, especially over the course of the year if they continue to watch them. But this is an area that as of right now, they of course believe we may need to sign somebody in January to do this. Now, Mazraoui's performance the other day was great there. If Amorim comes in, assesses it, and this is where I say if he puts someone like Garnacho here or anybody else into that position, says, you know what, they can do it, could that reduce the urgency of it? Yes, but it is still in the long term an area they know they need to make some moves on. So, depth signings here, potentially a starter quality player here and a young player for the future, potentially a starter quality player here for a young player in the future. And then this is another position where they're not convinced of Lisandro Martinez being like the be-all, end-all solution to this position. For a year and a half now, I've been talking about Gerard Braithwaite. They went for him. He was basically their top choice center back this summer. Continues to be that they would like somebody who's left-footed and who can defend well in the channels. Not to say Lisandro Martinez cannot play there, but they want to get a younger player as well who is more physical, fast, all of that as well into this position. So, they likely will be between, now and summer making the move for somebody who is starter quality, and Gerard Braithwaite is probably still top of the list at this point in time. because they wanted him. They were reluctant to walk away from the situation, and they kind of expect they should be able to come back in for him later. There's going to be competition. I do worry about the Liverpool thing because he has a lot of family that are close to Liverpool as well, even though he's an Everton player. But yeah, and so in January, the assessment is they are willing to spend if the right opportunity in one of these areas is available and presents itself, and they may need some outs to do it. But that's kind of the key, is that if again, when I say opportunities as it pertains to the new way United is being managed, it's more like are one of the players we're interested in, one of the players we want for the long term, in one of the positions we need to make a move on, is there an opportunity to get them? If there is, then they're willing to spend some money at that point in time. So it could be very interesting in January. They know they may need to do business there. They've shown with the appointment of Amorim midseason, going out and getting him, spending the money, and convincing him to join now, that that they want to be able to do something with the season. They certainly don't want a situation where they completely don't have a player in an area, in a position, in a spot to fit, and then it derails their ability to assess the team and all of that. And so as of right now, from what I can gather, it's leaning towards that left back position, as we know, a huge priority, and the midfield, where those are the two areas they feel there might be the best chance of getting somebody, because there's young players that they could obtain in those areas and players with release clauses, Miguel Gutierrez as well as Alvaro Fernandez. They'll have to see if they're valid in January. We don't always know. And that potentially that's where they have some players, just a hole of players where, you know, they could see the biggest urgency of need. This could certainly change with Ruben Amorim, his assessments and how he looks at the team once he gets in and sees them firsthand. But that's what they're looking at as of now. And that would, of course, lead to, in summer, that whatever they don't do there is going to become the priority in summer. We can expect very probably a right-sided forward, another midfielder, if not two, if they don't get one in January, and a left-sided center back at the minimum. I understand these would be the priorities that they're already observing and looking for towards the future. So yeah, they really would like to do this, and again, as it ties into the stadium, there's an understanding that they're not at a point yet where they can say, okay, we can stop rebuilding the squad, because there's a lot more business. And when I say stop rebuilding, it's not like they intend to stop spending on transfers, but they should be able to get to a point here soon where it's not a full regen of the squad that is needed every single summer, but where then you can start to make, okay, a couple ins, a couple outs, a couple ins, a couple outs, youth coming in to fill the ranks. And there's a really great crop of youth players coming through, but they're still a few years away in almost every single position. And so it's going to just be a little bit longer. And there's an understanding that, obviously, given that United are 13th right now, they have to be able to invest until they can be consistently back in Champions League, to make the argument for things like the regeneration of Old Trafford a lot better, and to have more funds for it and things like that. So these considerations all tie together. They know that, unlike the view of the past of Ed Woodward and Glazers, that the sporting success is a direct connection with how well they can do in terms of these areas, these other areas, right? How well they can do with the stadium and with the infrastructure and all of that. So they're expected to do all of that. So yes, they're willing to spend some money in January if the right opportunity is there. That's in line with their overall plans. They want to see what Amorim's assessment of the squads will be. And then in summer, they expect to continue on with that. And the early indications would be right inside forward, two midfielders, left back, left center back for the long term. And in the January window, the urgency, of course, seems to be on the left back side as well as the midfield. And we discussed some of the names. One of the really nice things that should hopefully be happening here over the break is that a majority of the players who are out with injury expected to return. Luke Shaw's expected to get back onto some training during the break, but I am so reticent to say that because it's happened again and again that he's been almost there, and like at the last moment, it just something goes wrong. So I'm not counting my chickens there. But aside from him, Mason Mount is back in training. Kobbie Mainoo's back in training and could be in even before the international break. Lenny Yoro's expected back after the international break. Harry Maguire should be back pretty soon as well. I believe during the break he should be able to get back on grass and to start training with the team. So we should end up with almost an entirely full squad for Ruben Amorim to look at. Unfortunately, with some of these players who might otherwise be on internationals, he's going to get a look at them too, and see how they fit into things. So it's almost the ideal circumstance, and we could have everybody but perhaps Shaw and Malacia. I'm still not sure if he'll ever be back. Back during the break in full training and able to to be available for selection for his first real team. So that should be pretty exciting. I'm hopeful of that, and that'll give us the best clue. Okay, that's what I have for today's video. Hope you found it interesting and informative. And obviously, as we move forward with Amorim coming in and assessments start being made and we start looking at in detail on more players, then it'll probably be easier to make some further, calls and give some more information on more specifically who we're honing in on for potentially January, for potentially in summer. So we'll have to see after that. Okay, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next video.